Welcome to the Daily Plunge. We are in the Epistle to the Romans, chapter 2, verses 12 through 24. Now, Paul is speaking to a diverse audience of both Jews and Gentiles, and they're approaching the faith in different ways. And he says to Gentiles, you know, you live apart from the law, right? But you're also going to perish apart from the law that's in the Bible. But you are still under the judgment of God. And then he says to the Jews, he says, you know, when you sin under the law, and you're going to be judged by the law. It's not enough to simply hear the law. In order to be declared righteous, you have to obey the law. And we know that what really is meant is that you have to obey it fully. You can't mess around with anything. And he says then in verse 14, the Gentiles, those who are outside the covenant of Abraham, the uncircumcised, as it were, you still do the law, the moral law of God. And in many ways, you're a law unto yourselves. You know what you're supposed to do, right? And in the very fact, you show that the law is written by God on the hearts of every human being, whether they are Jews or Gentiles, because of the way you behave, that your conscience bear witness to this. I mean, that whole idea of being good without God, the very fact that you think that there is justice, that there is good, I mean, these can only come to you through God's inspiration. Because a world without God is a world that is wicked, completely selfish, and that does not have justice. And so he says, your thoughts, you know, they accuse you for things that you do wrong, and they also defend you when you're doing right. And so he speaks about how you are living out the law, even though you don't know it. And then he says that everyone's going to be judged, both the Jews and the Greeks, and Gentiles will be judged through Jesus Christ. And then he goes on, now for those of you who call yourselves a Jew, you know, if you rely on the law, and if you boast in God, and if you know his will, and if you approve of what is superior, because you do know the law, and if you are convinced that you are a guide for those who are blind, and if you think you are a light for those who are in the darkness, and if you are an instructor of the foolish, and if you think you're a teacher of little children, because you have the law, the embodiment of the knowledge of truth, right? So he sets this up, you know, if, and you got to insert some of these ifs, but they're all implied in verses 17 through 20. Then, since you are so eager to teach others and be such a righteous teacher, why don't you teach yourself? Okay? And then he goes on, you know, you preach against stealing, but do you steal? You say people shouldn't commit adultery, but do you commit adultery? You abhor idols, and yet do you rob temples? You boast in the law, and yet you dishonor God by breaking it. And his whole point is a lot like what Jesus spoke, is that it is our thoughts, our intentions, they betray us just as much as our action. And I shouldn't say betray. What they really do is they reveal that we are sinners. And we're more than happy to point out someone else's sin and yet not see our own. And so as it is written, God's name is blasphemed amongst the Gentiles because of you. And this still applies today. If we say we're Christian, but we don't act like Jesus, we are embarrassing Jesus. We're blaspheming his name. Well, hey, thanks, friends. Have a blessed day.